Hello, I have a question for you. How's life been for you this past couple of years? Well, for millions around the world, the past 2 years will be remembered as a roller coaster of cataclysmic, unexpected events and lockdowns, a tsunami that would rock the world and herald us a shift in our society. However, on the positive side, we've discovered that we had more time to reflect, to take a closer look at how we've been living our lives. For many of us, it was the first time that we had to carefully consider how we were going to adapt and take back control of our lives. How could we improve our chance of survival in a changing world? It raised many questions. What about your health? What about your finances? What about employment and your financial future? What if we live to be 100 but are forced to retire at 70? Will you scrape by, or will you enjoy a passive recurring income long into the future based upon your efforts today? Well, let's first of all consider health. It's become all too clear that maintaining a strong immune system is of vital importance if we're going to enjoy a long, active lifestyle. Back in December of 2020, during the lockdown, we invited some of the world's leading authorities on healthy, successful living to come together and share their wisdom via a Zoom call. The definition of the following video recording is not as crisp as we would have liked had we been able to get everyone together in a studio. However, please trust me when I say that the content is well worth your full attention. So let's first of all hear from Dr. Nancy Cellini in New York.
Thank you for the introduction, Scott, and for the opportunity to provide some context for this important video by opening with some additional questions. Do you know what most healthy 100-year-olds have in common? Have you thought about living to be a healthy 100-year-old? Science is helping people live longer than ever and better than ever. So what are the possibilities? If you're like me and curious to find out, then spend this time with us to learn some invaluable insights. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Nancy Cellini, a doctor of public health, and I've spent the past 4 decades in clinical research, clinical trials, and drug development. I earned my master's and my doctorate in public health at New York Medical College in Valhalla, New York, and I am unapologetically a science-based, logical-minded individual who values good data grounded in sound research. I'm eager to share this video with you, as there has never been a more critical time in global public health and our shared human experience in our pursuit of well-being. And I want a long and healthy life, which motivated me to take a very serious look at a product called Immunical. After doing my own assessment, and with the information contained in this video, I chose to become part of a global network of professionals with a company called Immunitech. The quality of the research done at Immunitech is why I became a conscientious consumer of their breakthrough product, Immunical. Given my experience in clinical trials that are typically done by large-scale pharmaceutical companies, I really need to underscore this as a distinguishing characteristic of Immunitech, choosing to conduct excellent research that costs time, money, and large amounts of resources while maintaining scientific integrity. When you decide to consume a product, this should be part of your decision-making in terms of how well-researched a product has been. Immunical, as you'll see, is well-researched, with more than 70 publications in the medical literature published in peer-reviewed journals. With that as background, if I asked you what factors led to great discoveries and what they all have in common, what would you say? Profound curiosity, perseverance, resilience, a willingness to just keep going? Somewhere along the rigorous path, many researchers have found some unexpected connection, leading to eureka moments, and through these fortunate accidents gave us Teflon, X-ray, penicillin, and insulin, to name a few. The story you will hear starts with 2 dedicated research scientists who were deeply inquisitive along their research path, unlocking new insights about the immune system. And their perseverance is proving repeatedly how vital their early work was in revealing the links to human health and performance. You could say this story is far from over and more exciting than ever as new research continues to emerge. The Immunical product is a result of rigorous science that started in the 1970s and continues today. The science started with research on the immune system and fell upon a discovery on how to improve immune function through raising a natural substance called glutathione. Over the decades, this work has expanded to include a range of subjects across the health, wellness, and performance spectrum. These insights affect every breathing person on the planet, including everyone watching this video. The development of the glutathione precursor, Immunical, is fascinating, and we have two expert authorities to discuss it. When I was making the decision to join Immunitech, these two leaders confirm my professional choice. John Molson is co-founder of Immunitech and seventh-generation descendant of the founder of North America's oldest brewery. In his role as Vice President of Research and Development, John played a crucial role working alongside Dr. Gustavo Bonas, the lead scientist behind Immunical. This expanded the research platform, contributing to over 30 publications and 4 patent applications. John continues to play a crucial role today, overseeing one of the company's most ambitious research projects in decades, looking at the application of Immunical in brain health. John will be joined by Dr. Jimmy Gutman. Dr. Gutman is the world's leading author on glutathione. He is a former professor at McGill University Medical School. That's the Harvard of Canada, for those of you who may not know. Dr. Gutman's original specialty was emergency medicine. He served on a number of scientific boards, organized international medical conferences, and has educated thousands of doctors and students. An expert on glutathione and the author of several best-selling books on the topic, he is dedicated to seeing the gap bridged between conventional and complementary medicine. He has appeared numerous times on television and radio and in digital media discussing the role of glutathione in health and disease. What you'll hear in this video may be some of the most profound insights about what you can do for your own health and the health of those you love in this amazing story of unexpected discovery and rigorous scientific exploration that brought together an award-winning scientist-physician and a leading female immunologist at one of the top university hospitals in Canada. This rare powerhouse of intellectual curiosity, talent, and persistence resulted in the development of Immunical, and among other scientific findings, insights about a characteristic of healthy 100-year-olds. Every time I hear this story, I am inspired in my own work to help people get healthier. So sit back, tune in, and listen as these two experts tell you more about the journey that has brought us Immunical. And please remember that what is being discussed represents years of science, research, and publications. So spend the time to learn. It's worth your time, and I'm confident that you will take away many new perspectives. There will be a brief summary at the end of the discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Solleder, and thank you, Scott. You know, that's over 40 years of history that we can get into. So let's see what we can tackle today to give you a glimpse of what an incredible journey we've had to date, and maybe a look into the future. To do that, I'm going to be asking my good friend, Dr. Jimmy Gutman, some tough questions and try and cover some important ground. So I hope you're ready, Jim.
Absolutely, John. It's great being here with you all. Fire away.
So my first question, you've been practicing medicine for over 3 decades. How have people's attitudes towards health changed over the years? And how has this last year in particular made people more focused, more responsible for taking charge of their own health?
That's an interesting question, John. If I think back to when I first started practicing, the people around me were really just getting into the whole physical fitness thing. You know, gyms were popping up all over the place, and the weight loss programs exploded, and getting into better shape became a big movement. And this took the next natural step, and eating well and food choices became much more into our consciousness. And then later this was followed up by a stronger focus on vitamins and supplementation. And in the last decade, with all the breakthroughs in genetics and epigenetics, we've seen the beginnings of tailoring our diets, our lifestyles, even our drugs to our own personal DNA makeup. That's going to be the next big thing.
That is until COVID came along. This pandemic has really shown us how fragile our world, our society, and our health really is. That kind of put a full stop on many other things.
Yeah, John, and what we're all going to be more actively and acutely aware of is how to take care of our own immune systems, which makes our whole discussion today so much more relevant.
Okay, so let's say someone is now extremely motivated to take control of their own health and to attend to their immune system's health. The problem out there is there's so much information and misinformation. You've played a key role at Immunotech for over 25 years, sharing information with the public at large on this discovery and the research that followed it. As a world authority in the subject of glutathione, what attracted you to Immunotech?
Well, the way you've set up the question, it kind of leads me to structure my answer. You talked about information and misinformation, and that's exactly what did it for me, my attraction to Immunotech. I've been a scientist or a science geek anyways since I was a kid. And the beauty of science is that its intention is to discover the true mechanisms behind life, behind the universe, from an angle that's testable and reproducible. Now, the science behind Immunocal has already been around since the 1970s. And when I was lucky enough to run across it, I knew that it was so special, so innovative, that it led me to change my own career, to change the course of my life, and join this whole glutathione movement. So John, let me ask you the same. You went at this from a more corporate viewpoint, but I know deep in your heart you're a scientist too.
Well, certainly, you know, it was a huge career change for me, and what struck me initially was the breadth and depth of the scientific literature that was published, the scientific expertise of Dr. Bunos, Dr. Barishow, Dr. Kongshaven, the unique R&D culture that I found when we started the company and worked with Dr. Bunos, and of course, you know, the fact that as owners, we were willing to invest in R&D, and I think that was a huge asset, because instead of putting money into our pockets, we reinvested in the company, and I think that's why we are where we are today in terms of our scientific portfolio. So this was a whole new exciting world for me, and it was like going to university every day when I was going to see both yourself as well as Dr. Bunos. Okay, so let's turn back the clock now to the late 70s. Do you mind sharing with us the story of the discovery made by Dr. Kongshaven and Dr. Bunos? But before you do that, I'd like to give the audience a better appreciation of their scientific pedigree and how their training and their education experience all came together.
Yeah, please do, John.
So Dr. Bunos, he talked about this discovery as being serendipitous, and it's fascinating when you look at all the different parts that came together. The fact that they had worked together at the Montreal General Hospital. Dr. Bunos was an expert in nutrition, and he needed a model to study the immune system, and it just so happened that he was able to meet one of the top clinical immunologists in Canada at the time. Their work together produced these initial results demonstrating how Immunocal affected the immune system. And then as they gradually expanded the data, their associates that they were able to come in contact with, Dr. Barishow, Dr. Baptiste, added more information in terms of developing new bottles to test this product. So it really was, in all senses of the word, serendipitous that all these different parts came together to produce this result. Okay, Jim, so talk about what led up to the discovery in the early years of the development.
Let's start with some of Bunos's earlier considerations. Now, he came from Italy. He was trained as a surgeon, made his way over to North America to find his fame and his fortune. And when he got to North America, when he got to the United States, there's a certain chauvinism against foreign graduates, so he wasn't given a license to practice, but it was quite apparent how brilliant it was. So he went into research, and he asked this pretty basic question. Why is it that when you take the same kind of patient, the same age, the same sex, the same pathology, and you perform surgery on it, some patients will recover and be home in a week, and some patients are going to end up in an intensive care unit for 3 weeks? I mean, what's the difference? Well, even a kid can suggest that maybe it's what they've been eating. So that seemed like a pretty obvious answer, but nobody had looked into this before. So Dr. Bunos started investigating proteins and amino acids. We knew that it was going to be a protein that ultimately had the biggest effect on the immune system. Now, Dr. Bunos, brilliant man, certainly not an immunologist. I mean, even at the time, there wasn't an official specialty called immunology. So he got hooked up with an absolute superstar at the time at McGill University. She was a graduate student then, Dr. Patricia Kongshaven, doing her PhD. And she was doing a PhD on the immune system. I call Dr. Kongshaven the great-grandmother of clinical immunology. Now, why would I make a statement like that? Because she wrote, get this, the first chapter in the first book of clinical immunology that was widespread to the medical community. So, fair enough. She was the female pioneer in modern immunology and immunology practice. So they're studying all these proteins and amino acids at the time on animals in the laboratory. They're looking at animal protein and plant protein and algae, you name it, anything they get their hands on went into the lab. One day, this box arrives on Dr. Bunos's desk, and it's a box from Europe, and he opens it up, and inside of it is this fine white powder. And attached to the box is a note. And the note reads, Dear Dr. Bunos, we understand that you're studying protein biochemistry. This is a byproduct of one of our industries. We have no use for it, and we've been dumping it into the field. We've been dumping it into rivers, and the local government has told us to stop because the fields and the rivers are overgrowing. Very interesting. And so Dr. Bunos is playing with this stuff, and he also sees that there's a check of $10,000 attached to it, and getting research money at any time is always difficult. So he says, okay, I'm going to put this into my experiment. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, we discovered that the animals who are eating this white protein powder, the great-great-grandfather of Immunocal, these animals are living, they're living anywhere between 30 and 50% longer. So this this was exciting, and this drew a lot of attention, and this allowed us access to more brain power and more funding. And it did take us a couple of years to understand what was going on. The animals that were eating this white powder, this protein powder, what was going on was the powder was raising something called glutathione. And it was by raising glutathione levels that we were able to impart this added resistance, this added health, so that these animals were living longer. And of course, when we looked at this, it was certainly begging to have human studies done. And once we started doing our human studies and publishing, the floodgates opened, and just a wealth of information poured in. Patents were secured and applications were broadened. And now we have over 70 published articles in the medical literature that talk about Immunical.
You know, that's really incredible when you think of a small company like Immunotech producing this amount of data. I think that says everything and sets a new standard in our industry. And we could easily spend a whole webinar looking at any one of these studies. Now, early on in the company's history, we were able to secure a health claim from the Canadian government on the immune function. Tell us about that and give us an idea of what it takes to secure something like that.
Okay, well, this is an interesting piece of history. What many people don't know is that the Canadian government's stance on healthcare is pretty progressive. There was a time when a substance was either a drug or a food, nothing in between. This is still kind of the situation in the United States. Now, what Health Canada did was open up a new category between drugs and food that allowed supplements to make medical claims if, and only if, they carried enough hard research evidence to prove that they do what they claim they say they do. Now, not only that, there had to be at least 2 human gold standard studies to back this application up. Now, Immunotech at the time had a huge advantage over almost everybody else here because we've been doing formal trials on Immunical for many years already. And after sending over vans full of papers, we got approval to make claims about Immunical regarding the immune system.
Okay, for example, that Immunical provides glutathione precursors, that it maintains a strong immune system, and that it helps build antibodies and so on. For those of you who want to check these details, they're available on the Health Canada site under NPN number 8000-4370. So now let's move forward 10 years into the company's history. This saw the arrival of Dr. Wolf Droge from the German National Cancer Institute. Please, Dr. Gutman, tell us who he was and the significance of getting someone like this at Immunotech.
I'm glad you brought this up. It's too easy to underappreciate how big this name really was. Dr. Droge was really at the top of the pack of world-renowned immunologists at the time. He had published over 300 articles, and many of the elite scientists across the world would always wait with bated breath for his next new study. He really was the expert in glutathione, the expert in cysteine, the immune system, and he was at the forefront in anti-aging medicine and free radical biology.
You know, it was funny, Dr. Droge explained to me that he had a stack of offers on his desk from almost every pharma company on the planet, but he wanted to join us because he believed in Immunical and he wanted to continue his research, and that's why he moved his family to Canada and became the Chief Science Officer for Immunotech. You know, it's very simple. For those scientists, reputation is everything. So he would not have joined our company if there wasn't that unique research environment that I described earlier.
Exactly, John. People don't realize that in science, like in sports, like in politics, there exists a hierarchy from good to great to amazing to elite. And at each of these levels comes a new degree of credibility. And when a global leader says something, it's usually well worth listening to.
So one of Dr. Droge's primary motivations for coming into Canada was to continue his research. And one of the major projects he set up was an aging study in conjunction with researchers at the University of Montreal. And the reason this is so important is because the deterioration of both physical strength and mental acuity really impair the aging process. So we were interested in looking at how Immunical would impact a group of people from 65 to 80 years old. And so that was a very important landmark study that Dr. Droog put together.
Well stated, John. In fact, many studies suggest that it's the loss of physical abilities that even trump cognitive ones. Look at what we showed here. Again, in a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled design, that is the gold standard in research. We put half of these older subjects on a placebo and the other half on Immunical. And we put them through the same exact physical training program. And at the end of the study, we were able to demonstrate an increase of muscular strength of at least 10%. What does that mean? How does that translate into real life? This is huge. A difference of 10% strength in a geriatric patient is the difference between being in bed and in a wheelchair, between being in a wheelchair and using a walker, between using a walker and using a cane, between using a cane and playing with your grandkids in the backyard. This is the kind of thing that you can do with this natural supplement.
So this study was a real milestone for Immunitech because we're able to take that data and submit it to the government of Canada. As you know, that you have to submit 2 clinical trials to be able to secure a health claim, and we were able to do that. So I was wondering, Dr. Gutman, if you could talk to the audience about the first study and the data that we generated from it.
I hate to say that you're pretty modest here, so I'll toot your horn for you. My friend John Molson here is actually a world-class athlete himself, mostly in cycling, where he's got this huge pile of awards and trophies in his living room. It was John, in fact, who turned Dr. Bunos onto the idea of testing Immunical in athletes in the first place. John had personal experience using the Immunical himself and in several of his sports colleagues. Now, athletes are great to get involved because they do all the work for you if you're trying to put together data. They write down how many calories they consume, how many hours they sleep, how often they get sick, and on and on. Initially, we were interested in seeing if we can cut down on the amount of sick days that athletes were experiencing. Because as many of you know, one of the issues of overtraining is an actual dip in the immune system. We see this every Olympics, where many of the athletes seem to catch a virus a night or two before the big event. So we were getting back testimonials about catching fewer colds and stuff like that. But we also heard back from some of the members of the Canadian cycling team that their performance was better. And when we asked how much better, we were told with great enthusiasm, at least 1% better. Now, John seemed to be over the moon with this news, but stupid me, I couldn't just understand why everybody was so excited, 1%, until it was explained to me that the difference between the gold medal winner and the poor slob, who nobody ever remembers, pulling up in 6th place for most Olympic events was very often less than 1%. So clearly, we needed to validate this, and John organized a study at McGill University where we took university athletes, put them either on Immunical or placebo, put them through an identical training program for a summer, brought them all back in the fall for testing. And guess what? Did we show an improvement of 1%, 2%? No. We demonstrated an increase of muscle strength and endurance between 10 and 15%, which most people will tell you is pretty crazy. And after we published those results, the phone started ringing off the wall. And John, poor John, spent weeks fielding inquiries from trainers, from athletes, from teams, from sports organizations. And now when John and I watch the Olympics on TV, we can point and go, He's on Immunical. She's on Immunical. The Canadian Olympic team, the American Olympic team, British, Poland, Kenya, and so many more athletes taking Immunical just for that reason. John, all your fault.
You know, I wish I could take credit, but like everything, like the discovery, like the formation of Immunotech, it was a team effort. But the most important member of that team was Immunical, and that's really what got us to where we are today in terms of all the clinical data, as well as the athletic performance achievements.
Like I said, John, you're too modest, so let me put you on the spot now. You've developed some extraordinary relationships in the sports science world. One in particular with an organization called Oracle. Please tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, this was a fascinating story for me because every day I was learning something on the job, working with you, working with Gustavo, working with Patricia Gongshaven, and this is no exception. I remember the day that I received this phone call from Dr. Nathan Lewis, who at the time was with the English Institute of Sport, and he was very interested in Dr. Droge's research, and I got to talking to him. And I started talking to him about our initial study with Dr. Lenz, as well as the aging study we're doing. So I sent him that data, and we developed a relationship. And we initially sent him product for sailors that were on the British Olympic team. And this relationship expanded, and Dr. Lewis then joined Dr. Brian Moore, and they formed Oracle, which is one of the leading firms in the world that provides testing to professional teams, amateur athletes around the world. And they work, at the time they had over 500 athletes across 10 different disciplines. So we're talking NFL, F1, World Cup sailing. And what's really interesting about their relationship is that they were focused on fatigue and wellness. And the key aspect of fatigue they determined was glutathione depletion. And so they used Immunical as an intervention for these athletes. And so I got to see in real time, besides our clinical data, how Immunical was acting with these athletes and all the testing they were doing. So it was a huge learning experience for us at Immunotech. And I remember one of the interesting things that Brian Moore talked to me about was the fact that the two key criteria that he focused on with regard to products, and namely Immunical, number one was that the clinical research behind the product, and number two, that the product was tested and wouldn't cause any anomalies with regard to testing for their athletes. So we still have a very important relationship to this day, and we're very fortunate to be working with Oracle.
Thanks, John. Because it's through these types of relationships that Immunotech can really make a bigger mark in research-based sports science.
Exactly, Jimmy. So let's move on to another milestone that I think is crucial and one of the pillars in Immunotech's research history. I remember being put in touch with a researcher at the University of Denver, and his name was Dr. Linzman, and he was looking at experimental models of brain health. When we first started the company, I sat with Dr. Bunos for many, many hours, and he explained to me different aspects of glutathione metabolism. And I remember specifically him focusing on the brain, the importance of glutathione in the brain. And Dr. Bunos had this holistic view. So it was always in the back of my mind one day to find a group of researchers we could collaborate with to explore how Immunical may help the brain in some way. And we were very fortunate to start working with Dr. Dan Linzman at the time, probably around 2012. And he had a whole series of models that he was able to develop data on, publish data on, very important data, and we're still working with him today on different types of research looking at brain health. At the same time, because of the data that we had generated with Dr. Linzman, we were able to secure a very important relationship with Dr. Hyman Schipper at the Lady Davis Institute at the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal. And again, Dr. Schipper had different models looking at brain health. And again, we published a number of papers with Dr. Schipper. All of this came together where Dr. Schipper was able to present some of his data to his colleagues, and his colleagues were so impressed by the data that we were able to mount a study looking at unhealthy brain aging in conjunction with the memory clinic at the Jewish General Hospital and the Montreal Neuro. So that's a very important accomplishment and really says a lot about, again, Immunical, because, you know, as I explained, research at a certain point becomes a meritocracy. So if your product doesn't achieve the data, then you're not going to get, you know, these types of relationships, these types of protocols underway. And so, you know, we were very fortunate to be introduced to these people, but it's Immunical that got us to where we are today.
Well, this really is a major new focus for most of our research going forward, the brain. Just look at the studies we've already tucked into our portfolio. I did the first kind of small brain-related paper on autism way back at the turn of century, but this was picked up by a number of scientists, and now we've completed a major randomized controlled studies on autistic spectrum kids in one of the major ASD research centers in America at Nova Southeastern University. Now, this paper should be coming out soon. University of Denver has published a number of papers ranging from neurodegenerative disease to traumatic brain injury, and our plans are to tie together this type of work with professional sports leagues, and we've already made major inroads. Back at McGill University in Montreal, our work has been shared nationally, and we have some of the top neuroscientists in North America collectively looking at the role of using Immunical addressing the aging brain. Now, John, you've been instrumental again in organizing some of this groundbreaking research. Why don't you give us a little briefing on our MCI study? Just for those of you out there, MCI stands for mild cognitive impairment. It's a newer categorization of neurodegeneration that describes what so many of you have witnessed or experienced yourself. You know, like, where did I put my glasses? What was that lady's name again? Y'all know what I'm talking about here. Well, the bad news is that those of us having these cognitive changes are far more likely to go on to a full-blown dementia in the future, like Alzheimer's disease. So what we wanted to see was what we can do to jump in and intervene before that happens.
What's so important about this study, it's connected to a much larger initiative in Canada. The Canadian government has set up a series of research experiments in conjunction with about 14 institutions to the tune of $50 million, and they're studying unhealthy brain aging. The president of that consortium is part of the group that is studying Immunical and MCI. So the data from this study is going to be shared across those 14 institutions, which, you know, if it comes out positive, will be very, very important for Immunitech going forward. Okay, so let's stay in the area of aging. Now, I know, Jim, you've published a whole series of books on the subject, and you've spoken previously to me about glutathione research and the literature on glutathione specifically, and people who attain 100 years old, and there may be some correlation between glutathione levels and people who attain that age. So maybe you could share that with the public.
We can easily spend a day talking about this. Maybe we should start by looking at the prevalent theory on the aging process, the theory of oxidative stress. Now, one author described oxidation as an unfortunate consequence of being alive. You know, it's a funny quote, but it draws your attention. You see, as we utilize food, as we burn energy, as we breathe, we turn nutrients into our own tissues, and all of this results in the production of free radicals and oxidation. When we get exposed to too much of this potentially toxic waste, our tissues get weakened, damaged, grow old, and may die. And this whole progression to too much exposure to free radicals is what we call oxidative stress. And this is what drives the aging process. And this is where antioxidants come in. Antioxidants neutralize free radicals and combat oxidative stress. And for those of you who have some knowledge of glutathione, you'll know that glutathione is called the master antioxidant. You and I, John, we've discussed this many times. The bottom line here is that none of the between 2,000 and 4,000 different antioxidants known to science, none of them can function properly without the presence of glutathione. Glutathione is the driving force behind our whole antioxidant mechanism. So as far back as the 1970s, scientists have looked at the correlation between glutathione and aging. Dr. Bruno Kong-Chabot, who discovered Immunical, wrote this on very early. Remember, we were talking about extending the lifespan of mice between 30 and 50%. Now, that prompted similar measurements in humans. And it's been shown that as we age, we lose glutathione every year. And a rough estimate is about a 10% drop in every decade. And this glutathione level shows a clear correlation to the incidence of diseases of aging. You know, we'll talk about this in another program. So here's where it gets really fascinating. Glutathione levels are dropping and dropping when you sample people from different age groups. But when you take blood samples from people who are over 100 years old, guess what? Guess what? They have really good levels of glutathione. Why? Well, the answer why these centenarians have high glutathione levels is the same reason that they're alive. They have this genetic or environmental predisposition to maintain good glutathione levels. But the people around them whose levels have dropped have been selected out of the populations and have died off. This is natural selection at its best.
You know, that's such a great way to demonstrate the enormous potential of the strategy. I just love it. So one final question. You know, I know you've been practicing medicine for many years. I know your birth date. You've taught emergency medicine. You're published many books. You're very interested in complementary medicine. So if I had to ask you kind of the key areas that you would like to talk about to sum up why this strategy is so important, maybe share that with the audience.
You know, John, that's actually harder to do than people would imagine. There's so many ways to approach this. From a scientific perspective, Immunical has been studied extensively for over 40 years, and its credibility well established in the medical literature. This is something that the vast majority of natural products, unfortunately, cannot say. And also from a scientific perspective, there's like over 150,000 articles published on the topic of glutathione available from the top research data bank, something we call pubmed.gov. To put this in context, 150,000 articles on glutathione, that's about double the amount of articles written on vitamin C and vitamin E put together. Imagine. And still, so many people haven't heard about this. From a more personal point of view, I, like everybody else out there, don't want to get sick and don't want to suffer damage from toxins and pollutants and pesticides and herbicides and preservatives. I do want to extend the amount of healthy years I have on this planet. I do want to be as productive as possible. I do want to have the immune defenses to take me forward into this unknown future. And finally, from a practical point of view, I believe that this strategy is so important, so profound, that people will be raising their glutathione levels on a regular basis in the future, just like they take a multivitamin, just like they brush their teeth every morning.
It's great to be able to share this with my friend and colleague, Dr. Jim. And I'd like to thank the whole team behind the team for putting this project together. Immunical has been part of my life since 1997. It changed my life, and I hope it does the same for you.
I promised you new insights, and hopefully, after listening to the informative dialogue between John Molson and Dr. Gutman, you're inspired to know more. At the beginning of this video, we heard from Scott Lucy in London, England. Scott was previously a BBC television presenter and is now my colleague here at Immunitech. Scott reminded us of how up until 2020, many people had taken their personal and financial health for granted. Let's hear again from Scott as he sums up on what we've just heard and how we can take advantage of this shift in our awareness. Scott, back to you.
Thank you, Nancy. Now, with this new understanding, there is clearly an opportunity for those who wish to take back control of their lives, to improve not only their health, wellness, and physical performance, but also their financial health by sharing this knowledge with those whose lives and well-being matter the most. You see, when deciding on how to best bring Immunicol to the attention of the public and to the global marketplace, it was agreed upon that the news surrounding this unique natural product should only be shared from person to person by those whom were experiencing the benefits of taking Immunical on a regular basis and could therefore testify as to its effectiveness. Both young and old alike take Immunicol every day, and the results we experience are truly astounding. Each and every month we ship millions of servings of Immunical to families all over the world, and we generously reward our ever-increasing army of part-time and full-time individuals around the world who promote Immunicol and enjoy a recurring monthly income, which for many exceeded their expectations. So now you have all the facts. I encourage you to try Immunical for yourself and feel the benefits of this unique formulation that has touched the lives of millions for more than 20 years and has created this legacy company known as Immunitech. To discover more, simply get back to the person who has shared this video with you and ask them how you can get started. Thank you for watching.